I found the point of college really was to make you an interesting person and an interested person. I'd say maybe one habit that I started to develop then was like learning how to listen.
You left Stanford Law and you did something that today is just not seen very often. You stayed at the same firm for 25 years.
I had great mentors. I mean, my mentor at Lazard, who I'd worked with over the summer, whom I didn't work with when I went back, is still a very close friend. And I think I was probably like a first or second year vice president, so maybe like 4 or 5 years into the job, I had an opportunity to join a very large hedge fund. So a number of them filed for bankruptcy, and I was working with as an M&A banker, selling those businesses that had cost billions of dollars to create. For understanding what people mean rather than what they say is really critical. So impact is helping people and being a good friend and supporter.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the Jewish Professionals Podcast, the JP Podcast. I'm Hillel Bainach.
And I'm Benjamin Winters, and we're students at Yeshiva University, just looking for some advice.
Our aim is to bring to you Jewish professionals from every industry to learn from their successes and failures, how they grew in their career and Jewish identity, and made a Kiddush Hashem along the way.
We hope you can apply what you learned through the lessons to your own life as they pass the torch to us, the next generation. We can't wait to go along this journey with you. This is the Jewish Professionals Podcast.
Woo! We are back in the studio for another incredible episode of the Jewish Professionals Podcast in the midst of the Winter Olympics, something that's sometimes overlooked, doesn't get the same hype as the Summer Olympics, but the USA women's hockey, I know our audience are big fans, just won a gold.
We do have some Toronto fans though too, so I'm sorry about it.
Yeah, so that's a big win. And you just see some of these tricks that these guys do, these like skiing, double backflip into a front flip, like they don't seem humanly possible.
Just the best part about it is all Olympic athletes make their sport look incredibly easy. Like you look up these people like doing these flips, you're like, okay, you twist your body on the hat. It can't be so hard.
Let's try just going down the slope first without wiping out.
It's very true. It's very true. It's very impressive. Shout out to the women's hockey team for taking a W. And lastly, on that note, I was reading a Wall Street Journal article, and it said, I didn't go so into depth on it, but it said that is the biggest rivalry in sports right now.
Women's hockey.
Women's USA hockey versus Canada hockey, and we still have the men's matchup. Hopefully, we'll see if that's going to be the final in the Olympics.
Yeah, we're playing Canada again, right?
Yeah. Well, both teams have to win the semifinal, Canada and the US, which they're both heavily favored. But if you remember, I think it was last year, 2 years ago, the Four Nations face-off, which was the NHL.
Big loss for America.
That game got a lot of fireworks, but hopefully we'll see a rematch. But to bring us back to our program, we are so lucky. We have Ari Lefkovits with us, the managing partner of Delos Capital with nearly 25 years of experience on complex capital solutions and restructuring transactions. Before joining Delos in 2024, he spent his career at Lazard as the managing director in New York and London, advising on more than $300 billion in transactions across restructuring, M&A, and liability management. He holds an AB from Dartmouth College and a JD from Stanford Law School. Ari, thank you so much for joining us today in the studio.
Great. Ben Hillel, thanks so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm looking forward to our chat today.
It seemed like you played hockey back in the day, by the way you answered that. You seem like...
No, all I've played is a couple of intramural hockey games, but when I was in college, I was in a fraternity. My fraternity was the hockey team fraternity, so I knew obviously the hockey team very well, including a number of folks who went on to play in the NHL, and some guys actually who had left school early and then returned back after their NHL careers to finish up their
At Dartmouth.
At Dartmouth.
So
Yeah.
wow. Dartmouth is a hockey powerhouse.
It's pretty good. It doesn't get all the attention it sometimes deserves, but great guys. There's a massive amount of spirit and backing for the team.
By the way, it's funny that you say that they returned back to school to finish their degrees, because right now in college basketball, I don't know if you're a fan, you have people who entered the NBA and like skipped out on their college eligibility. They're 25, 26, and they're going back to college for a degree, but they're also able to play.
Are they now actually able to play? I thought
so
there was
now
a ban on that.
So now they're able to play. So you have people who I remember when I was in high school watching their high school highlights, and now when I was in middle school watching their high school highlights, and now they're coming back to college to play, and it's creating this whole controversy. it's amazing. Were they able to play at Dartmouth hockey once they came back? I assume not.
I don't think so.
Yeah,
I think,
okay, fine.
I think
Okay, good.
They had gone through their eligibility, and they were going really for the education.
Okay, good. Now I hear Dartmouth is an NIL powerhouse, spending especially on the hockey. So
Every school's got to be. But before NIL existed and before you were a prominent frat member at Dartmouth, tell us about, your early life experiences, kind of what your childhood was like.
Yeah, sure. So I grew up here in New York City. My father was a doctor at Mount Sinai Hospital. I grew up with a pretty tight knit family. Had my mother's parents lived nearby. My father had a big family in the area as well. Definitely, a lot of folks who had grown up during the Depression and serving in World War II, who were very meaningful influences in my life, and definitely taught me the importance of working hard and doing good service, making sure everything you did was you did to the best of your ability, and you didn't take anything for granted. That was very important. I remember early on, my uncle, who was very experienced World War II veteran, very decorated World War II veteran. I remember I was somewhere and I took a lot of food on my plate, and he's like, "You're going to finish it all," because I remember, he's like, "Yeah, when I was growing up in the Depression, we only took exactly what we could take because somebody else had to take more." So that was an interesting highlight. But in general, just a focus on being close to your family, doing good work, being very focused on it, and finding ways to making sure you relate to everybody really, really well and you treat people well.
Wow. Yeah, it's so interesting because as we get farther and farther out from those events like World War II and the Great Depression, we kind of lose a perspective of what the world used to be like, and we take a lot of what we have for granted.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, both of my grandfathers were immigrants here, and I think when I think about what they gave up to come here, one left. He was young and hungry and came here just after World War I. Like 3 of his brothers were drafted into the Austrian army in World War I, and he never saw them again.
Wow.
Like right after the war, somebody threw a rock at him, and because he was Jewish, and he said, "I'm out of here," and he took a boat, sold hot dogs at Yankee Stadium, did whatever he could to pay his way through med school, and kind of really lived the American dream. And my other grandfather came here from Belgium, and he arrived here actually the week World War II started. So yeah, I mean, when you think about the sacrifices that people made, and when we think things are bad, our ancestors, people before us, definitely faced much far worse things. Again, whether it's growing up in the Depression with so little, or fleeing oppression. So I've always felt very very grateful and blessed.
Wow, so
You can't get more of an American dream than selling hot dogs at the
Yankees.
Yankees. That is the definition, right?
It's true. It's also I feel like every little kid's dream. They're just like, I want to be the person who works at the.
So they can go to the games.
Right, exactly. That's amazing. Yeah. All the way through med school. So you emphasized the importance of family. Was there also a big emphasis in your house on hard work and quote unquote making it?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, obviously, growing up in a professional household, and there was a lot of emphasis on working hard and sacrificing what you needed to sacrifice to be successful, for sure. Especially with high performing family there, and I was the oldest son, so definitely an expectation that you'll follow in that tradition.
Yeah, and so you went to Dartmouth, right? And you assumed that you were pursue law, or was that something that you took on later?
No, I went right after school. I went to law school in part because I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, and I figured get a good education and get 3 more years to really to figure that out. So I had the opportunity to go out to California, which was something I wanted to do. I'd never lived on the West Coast before. And I had been freezing in New Hampshire for 4 years. So the opportunity to, go out west, kind of figure out what I wanted to do, get a great education, meet interesting people. It was also the time that the internet boom really started to happen in the late 1990s. So there was the attraction to do that. And, so I went out there and, figured I'd, go studied law, which was interesting. I'd done some legal internships in college, which I really did enjoy, and was excited for that education.
Were there some lessons throughout your university experience or some things that you did that you felt were just so important that really helped set you up in life to go on the successful journey you went on?
I found the point of college really was to make you an interesting person and an interested person. So when I was in college, I tried all different kinds of things. I'm like, for example, a Jewish kid from New York being in a fraternity with a bunch of hockey players, just different, different group of folks. But trying like many different classes, different jobs at school.
Like what jobs?
I sold ads for the school paper, so I walked around. I basically had to go around to all the merchants in town and get to know them and talk about how the school paper would help grow their business and kind of like hear their stories, which was a lot of fun. It was the first time I ever sold anything, so that was an important lesson that I learned. And again, I learned the importance of selling right, meaning I think I saw a Charlie Munger podcast once, and he talked about the importance of only selling something that you would buy so that you have real conviction in it. And I kind of learned that by selling ads for the Dartmouth paper.
You were passionate about the Dartmouth paper.
Yeah. Well, I was passionate about it, but also, what I meant was when you'd go to the local diner or the local clothing store or what have you, to kind of explain, the Dartmouth student body and how they could be helpful to the business, and try to sell somebody a package that you thought was fair and would be helpful, rather than necessarily selling the the most expensive package. Because like the last thing you'd want to do is sell somebody an expensive ad for a week or a month and then have the person say, well, no, thanks, but I'm good. More, sell them, have them buy an ad where they felt good, and you could build a long-term relationship. So I thought that was an important lesson to learn. And then I also spent time with I worked for the college in fundraising. So I would reach out to alums to solicit them to support the school. And again, that I did feel passionate about because as a student I could talk to the alums about all the benefits that we had from their support and how important their support was. And it's something hopefully I've reciprocated now by kind of continuing to support students there, so that you get the most of your education from the school. So that's an easy sell. Again, you need to think about put yourself in the shoes of the local businesses to understand what's best for them.
So could you maybe also sell a college kid now who thinks that he has to come to college and for all these high level, high finance jobs, whatever it is, he has to start right away recruiting, banking, consulting, you name it. He has to account everything. He has to start right away. What's the value in taking college to expand your mind, take a class that you might not necessarily be so career oriented in? How would you sell someone on that? Is it the same thing nowadays, or now just your employer is looking to see the skills that you have on your resume?
Well, I think it's the same like then as now. By the way, I think it's almost like to the point of absurd that people show up in college and your sophomore, fall and winter, people typically recruit for a summer job between your junior and senior year, which then leads to your job after school, right? So it forces students to choose much earlier than we used to. And I think it's been driven by employers and, kind of embraced or at least accepted by students. I think that giving people more time to figure out what they want will lead to a better recruiting process, better selection, but that's just not where things are going. They've just moved earlier and earlier, and so sometimes you see people who take a job that they think sounds good, but isn't really the right thing for them. And had they had 2 more years to mature, they might have found that out in the long run. I think better for the employer and the student, but this allows employers to kind of get to the talent pool faster.
Right.
Right. So if you were a student right now, you're a student here today in 2026, would you go and recruit right away?
Oh, great question. My own son did the recruiting process, and we talked for a long time about it because I talked to him about this very issue. I was like, do you want to go now and go explore or go explore more and then figure out what you want? I think to the extent that you want certain very selective jobs, like the best window to get them is early, right? And if you go later, you might get them if an opening happens to arise, but you also may not get them, and then they go. So I think if you have an idea that you want to try something, then I think you probably need to go do it now, because that's just where the market is. In an ideal world, I think employers would wait a little bit and allow students to mature, and so that you can have better selection. But that's just not where things are today.
Yeah. Right. So you graduate and ultimately go into Stanford Law School. What were some of those experiences like, and what did you learn?
Well, first, college again was about like being an interesting person, just going to try different things all the time, whether it's again working in your job or going to your fraternity or taking a class in something you'd never learned before, like Eastern philosophy or something like that.
So, or hanging with the hockey dudes.
Yeah, hanging with the hockey dudes. So it's just a very broadening experience, going on terms abroad, meeting people who are going to take you to learn how to bake, Indian pastries or whatever the case may be.
Really, Indian pastries.
It's just like cool. It's like really, really cool things. At law school, definitely much more focused, right? First of all, when I got to law school, I'd come right out of college, and probably I think about 20% of my class had, including a few friends of mine from school. But most of the people were older. They were more mature. A number of them were married or in very serious relationships. Several of them had kids. So it was just a different environment. Now there was a good group of people who were kind of younger, just out of college, and had that kind of still had that college mentality. But there were people. That was in many ways it was a more serious environment. Most people kind of knew they wanted to be lawyers who they had spent time after school doing other things and made the choice to return to school so they could study law. But I think like the depth and rigor of thinking that I was exposed to in law school was really amazing. And again, law school is very broad, right? You can study criminal law or corporate law or tax law or intellectual property law, all different kinds of law. And it's still a pretty broad experience. And some of my best classes there were actually multidisciplinary classes where you had students from both the law school, but also the business school or the engineering school or what have you, kind of cross collaborating. Remember, there was one class I took that where I think it was actually taught at the business school, but we had we had a group of business engineering and law students, and our job was to create the blueprint for a company, and we had created a blueprint for a company that did title insurance. So basically, title insurance, there's a huge amount, the commissions in that business were huge, and we wanted to build a company that disintermediated the title insurance and would save homeowners a lot of money. We met with a VC investor at Kleiner Perkins to present the case, and I think just working with people from different backgrounds to pull together the business plan was really interesting because we all brought different skills to the table.
Yeah. If you would go back to that time, right, you put yourself in that mindset, or you just reflect on that period of your life, do you think there's a habit or kind of mindset that you had at that time that really compounded over your career? And if you look back at this work, it's like, I started that habit, or I realized that's what it took at that point.
I'd say maybe one habit that I started to develop then was like learning how to listen better to people. Especially when you're in like a room with people with different skills, especially when they're talking about things where they know more than you, and kind of have that help frame your perspective on things.
Yeah.
Could you speak about the experience about, I guess, leaving the East Coast, moving totally to the opposite side of the country, leaving your family, and not only figuring out your career at the same time, but figuring out how to live at the same time? Many of our guests stay in New York, but also many don't, and some leave the classic metropolitan area and assume careers in other areas. What was that experience like, and how would you, looking back on it, grade it?
I really enjoyed living on the West Coast. I mean, in some ways it's similar, but in many ways it's a different culture. So it took a little bit of acclimation to it. Also we were in school, so we were many different backgrounds who were put together. And I made some really good friends who continue to be good friends. I've always found that to be a really enjoyable experience. It can have its challenges because when you leave the comfortable for the unknown, it obviously brings uncertainty. But I've made when I went to college, made really good friends. When I went to law school, made really good friends. When I came back here, made really good friends. And when I moved our family moved to London for 3 years while I was at Lazard, and we also made great friends there. So, and again, all like very different people. So, and by the way, all those experiences I think have made me a better listener, which I found to be a really important skill.
Right.
Yeah. So you left Stanford Law and you did something that today is just not seen very often. You stayed at the same firm for 25 years. So can you tell us, first of all, why you didn't decide to pursue law and you decided to go straight into a financial firm?
So a couple of things. I had a summer analyst job at Lazard when I was in college, and I really liked it. And I actually had an offer to go back. And at the same time, had an offer to go to law school. So I thought I would try. I really wanted to try law school. In between my second and third year of law school, I was working at a law firm here in New York, and we were representing the underwriter of a bond deal for a supermarket company. And I got to know the bankers for the underwriting company, and really liked what they were doing, and talked to them more about it. And I kind of felt that I really wanted to go back and do banking. That's something that I thought I could be good at and would really enjoy. And so my third year of law school, I interviewed with several investment banks, and I worked at Lazard for the summer and decided to go back there. Had an offer and decided to go back.
Were you placed in the same group you were during the internship?
No, to a different group. So again, had great mentors. I mean, my mentor at Lazard, who I'd worked with over the summer, whom I didn't work with when I went back, is still a very close friend. And my partner mentor at the law firm I worked at here in the city is also still a very close friend. So I think having good mentors is really, really important, and requires both sides to invest to make it work. But to your question, I decided that after law school that I had a passion for finance and banking, and I really wanted to try it. And I figured, like in the worst case, I could probably find a legal job if for some reason I didn't like it. But it seems to have worked out okay. So still here on the finance side of the of the ledger. I think I just had more of a passion for finance and doing deals.
Could you take us through those, I guess, the first 1 to 2 years? I know you did the summer internship there, but where you're walking in to, I guess, a newish environment and disprove it to your employer's mentality, especially in a very pressure-filled environment. Sort of, what did you do to differentiate yourself? What did you do to, I guess, not get the imposter syndrome and continue to, did you ask questions a lot? Were you more on the figured out yourself side? And then also, what can someone who's walking into that same position do now?
Most financial institutions probably have much deeper support now. In like the early 2000s at Lazard, I mean, it was a pretty demanding place. They're really smart people, really good people, but just very high expectations. Kind of like, I think somebody once told me there, like at school you can get a 95 and get an A. Here you get a 95 and you fail, so you have to get 100. And the kind of starting by building a good technical knowledge base was really important. So that's what I focused on. And by the way, coming from law school and being a college history major, I didn't really have that much modeling experience. So really had to work with people and ask them to help me to develop those skills. And later on, I think those skills were kind of a necessary but not sufficient condition to move ahead. Like, it was critical to be able to build a model and understand the financial implications of anything. But it was more important to understand why deals were happening, what each side was getting out of them, what each side was giving up out of it to make them happen, and kind of understand like how the picture went together, and then talk to people about why the deal was important, because people would have to make concessions to make the whole picture work, and understand you're giving up X to get Y, but Y is greater than X, so you should go do it. But I'd say for the first 2 years, I spent a lot of time really focusing on building that technical skill set, because it was something that I didn't have, and my peers largely did. We had some training, and that was helpful, but I really found that the on-the-job training was the most important. Now, I think that today that has changed to the point where there's, first of all, a lot more training before you even get to be on the job, and then more analyst kind of protected days and protected hours. So it's a little less sink or swim. It's still it's an ultra challenging job, an ultra demanding job, but again, just like less sink or swim than it used to be.
Right. It's interesting, especially.
And by the way, for the better. I mean, I wanted to say I don't necessarily look back at that part. You made it through the crucible, and that's great. But I think the way that it's done now is probably a lot more effective.
Right. It's more effective, you think?
I think so, because you kind of like cut through a lot of the nonsense and just get to having people understand skills and what they need to be successful without having to kind of play a game or deal with people who call you up at on a Friday afternoon and say, well, cancel all your weekend plans. You got to be here. That happens from time to time, but I think it's less prevalent. And in order to do that, there's clearly an emphasis in any firm I know on really needing it, as opposed to just somebody forgetting that they have a meeting on Tuesday and they need an 80-page book done for it.
Well, I'm reading Liar's Poker for the first time, which I know is like the finance Bible, which talks a lot about the mortgage trading when it started. I know this was prior to when you started, but it just seemed like the biggest free-for-all of all time. Like the definition of sink or swim. Like if you did not know and teach yourself and work through it yourself, whereas you're saying now you were screwed. But whereas nowadays you do have the training classes, you do have, like you said, the internship pipeline to teach you the skills to then go back to full time. So I guess, the support system isn't necessarily a bad thing.
The information is much more freely available now than it was then. I mean, everybody I interview is like, far more knowledgeable than I probably was as a second, third year associate. Like they just, there's been kind of free access to information about how to value a company, how to think about a transaction. The core pillars that like I had to learn over time are now readily available, and people get almost before they even start their internships.
Yeah. Throughout your 25 years there, are there any specific experiences or stories that stick out as kind of having shaped your perspective?
I remember, I think I was probably like a second or third year associate working on a very complicated restructuring, and I was working with a partner I was quite close with, and there was a board meeting coming up in Houston, and he had to be somewhere else that day. I forgot where it was, and we were talking about, I think the company was deciding whether to sell some businesses or not. And he was like, you just go to the board. I was probably like 28, 29 at the time. And he's like, why don't you go to the board meeting and do it? And I said, are you sure you want me to do this? And the guy was like, no, he's like, you do all the work, you know it all anyway. And, if I'm in the meeting, I'm going to give the intro and then turn it over to you. So just go and answer your questions. You'll be fine. And, I really appreciated like that. And I went and, it all went well, and they made the right decision. And, so I really appreciate the confidence that he gave me. And I worked for two people, Barry Ridings and Terry Savage, who were great mentors to me. And, they would always have our back 100%. And, and really teach us. So, I appreciate that mentorship very, very dearly. It's served me well, and also, served as a role model for me for dealing with the people who I work with who are coming up to, teach them, and then, let them go out there and, give them a little extra rope and let them learn, knowing that from time to time they're going to stumble, and just knowing that you have to just step in to support them, but always have their back no matter what, so that you build their confidence.
Before we get to London, I have to ask, was there ever a time where you were really thinking seriously about pursuing another opportunity, aside for obviously 2 years ago? And what was that situation like if it came?
I think I was probably like a first or second year vice president, so maybe like 4 or 5 years into the job, I had an opportunity to join a very large hedge fund, and a number of the people in my class had left. I think I was like the last one of the kind of the core there who had stayed at my year, and I told Barry and Terry that I was going to leave, and I'd actually resigned from Lazard, and specifically Terry, were like, you can't go, and they kind of explained why, and I thought about it for a while. It was a job that I really thought I wanted, and I passed on it to stay, and wound up staying at Lazard, and was glad I did that.
Wow.
What made you want to stay? Was it just Barry and Terry, I guess the mentorship like you mentioned before? Was it you said all that your class had left. What was it? Was it the mission at Lazard?
I had a lot of good friends who were,
Right.
older and younger than me in the team. So yeah, definitely the team was part of it. And then, the other thing I kind of thought a lot about maybe what I liked doing, and what I was good at and what I was not good at, and decided that what I was doing actually was a really good fit, and might have been was probably a better fit than what I thought I wanted to do. So yeah, I'm glad I stayed, and wound up staying for a long time thereafter.
Oh, yeah, let's touch on exactly what you were doing within the investment banking group. You mentioned restructuring. Just give a broad overview exactly what it was.
Yeah, so I guess I didn't know anything about restructuring, and never took a bankruptcy class in law school. I was doing M&A work for telecom and tech companies, and we right after, actually it was actually right before 9/11, there were a number of companies that had built fiber optic, very, very advanced at the time, fiber optic networks that spanned the country and offered far more efficient telecommunications services. But they were built using debt, and they had no customers. So the bonds were coming due, and they had no way to refinance that debt. And so a number of them filed for bankruptcy. And I was working with, as an M&A banker, selling those businesses that had cost billions of dollars to create for pennies on the dollar. And through that, I got to know the restructuring team at Lazard, which eventually offered to join just through doing M&A work with them. And what we did there was, for the most part, advise companies that either had too much debt that they couldn't repay, or had a lawsuit, or had a pension obligation, or had unfavorable contracts, on restructuring those obligations so that they could pay them off. And a lot of times that involved filing for bankruptcy, and other times it involved just renegotiating with creditors outside of court to resolve the liabilities. And sometimes it involved selling companies, sometimes it involved raising new money, sometimes it involved converting debt to equity. So it's in some ways it was pure corporate finance. You needed to take a look at the assets and what they were capable of producing in terms of cash flow and what they were worth, and then figuring out the liability side of the balance sheet. Well, what's the appropriate amount of liabilities for these assets to carry? What's the appropriate amount of capital that the company needs to raise more capital? And then how do you accomplish that all? Because that's very complicated. I found over my career, people often hate losing money more than they like making money, and so there are very deep emotions involved in restructuring these companies, both in terms of fixing the liability side of the balance sheet, but it's also sometimes fixing the asset side, because fixing the asset side can mean selling assets that people don't want to sell or have been part of the company for a long time. It can mean closing down facilities. It can mean letting people go who have been at the company for a long time in order to save it. So it's a really emotionally challenging process. I mean, what one story is, I remember I was working on an aluminum restructuring for a consolidated aluminum company, and the company had amassed huge healthcare liabilities where they committed to retirees to pay for their healthcare for the rest of their lives. And again, I was probably in like my mid to late 20s, and went to a union hall in Erie, Pennsylvania, to talk to the retirees there for the union about why the company wouldn't be able to pay the promises that it had made to them and their families.
That's a tough conversation to have.
A snot-nosed kid out of college and law school. That's hard to do. So I mean, I guess you kind of things like that help you grow up and recognize that you look at spreadsheets and you negotiate in boardrooms. That's one thing, but when it affects people's lives, that's a different thing.
Right.
And a few years later, I was actually on the other side. We worked with the UAW from I think about 2005 was the first deal we did through 2009. The big three auto companies had promised, had also made very large retiree medical promises to their retirees, and we worked for the United Auto Workers, who were some of the best clients I've ever had. Salt of the earth people. They knew in many cases, they actually knew the car companies better than the management did, and we worked with them as GM and Ford and Chrysler needed to renegotiate their medical liabilities when GM and Chrysler filed for bankruptcy and Chrysler was bought by Fiat. There I think we're able to get a good deal for under the circumstances for the retirees, which we were pleased about.
So you're on both sides. You saw both sides. You both were the kid who told the retirees, like, oh, by the way, this is not going to happen. Your healthcare, and then also you represented them on the other side.
Different cases.
Right.
So one was for an aluminum company. We were negotiating with the United Steelworkers, and then for the auto companies, we were representing the United Auto Workers.
Oh, got it. Okay.
So and by the way, during my time at Lazard, I worked for a number of creditors and buyers of assets and pension funds and unions and others, but probably did like 80% of my work was working for companies, but I did have time.
Right.
I did have experience working for the other side.
What it reminds
too.
me of? I don't know if you've seen The Office.
Okay.
But Michael Scott promises to pay for all of these kids' college tuition, and he goes in basically to tell them that, I don't have the capital.
What I'm imagining is like, the Hoosiers movie when you have those town halls, like I guess like they did in like I guess rural America, and you have to go in there and like you say one thing and then you have everyone get up and go upset. And I'm seeing like a young 20-year-old go in there and be like, oh, by the way, that insurance, it's not happening. And then you see everyone like throwing things or whatever.
Yeah, well, now I realize like they of course sent me because I was like I was the second most junior guy. So they're like, we
don't want to deal with this.
The other guy's the analyst, he's leaving, so you have to go. You have to be the one to go. Go deal with these guys. I mean, unfortunately, it's an area of the country that had been really hit hard as manufacturing migrated out of there, and people weren't unfortunately treated all that well. And I did go there. The company had a outstanding labor team. Remember Jim McAuliffe, the labor, the head labor representative for the company, had a good relationship with the steelworkers, and we had a fantastic labor lawyer as well, who were very helpful. Help that young kid go out and talk to the union members, and I think, and we wound up negotiating with them, but. We did. I felt we did as right by them as we could.
Right. Do you think on a lot of these restructuring cases, is the majority of the time a miscalculation, or is it economical trends they couldn't have thought of? How is it that so many of these big companies mismanaged their either healthcare plans or something else?
things like this aluminum company, Kaiser Aluminum, that we were working on, and the big three. I mean, those were problems that were built up over many, many years,
Right.
and needed a lot of work to go through. But then, other companies that have been involved in, or like mortgage companies, for example, leading up to the GFC, there were subprime mortgage companies that were making loans to borrowers that didn't verify income, and basically people who couldn't pay were borrowing too much money, and it worked until the party stopped, and then it all collapsed. So so you have situations like that just pop up where companies were basically allowed to do things that were uneconomical, and then came back to bite them.
Yeah.
Other times have been in cases where there've been fraud. So it's really all over the map. But what I found a lot of times is that the companies we work with are missing key. The management teams aren't full, and so people are being asked to kind of cover too much, and as a result, over time, they're not overseen as effectively as maybe they should have. And so it's really kind of having like the right people in the right seat to run things where things can be avoided. By the way, there are a number of companies that I've worked with over the years that nobody knows we were ever involved in. So we some of the best restructurings I've been in have been non-restructurings, because we were brought in early, and were able to solve a problem and help a company get on the right path. And again, nobody ever knows that they even contemplated a restructuring, because we were in the background providing advice.
Yeah. Right. I mean, that's super, especially with the fiber cable company, because that's extremely CapEx, intensive project, and that just takes underwriting, right? You're supposed to understand the amount of financing you would need for a project like that, and so to not be able to get that off the ground at all and just go bankrupt is it's just mismanagement.
You're right. I wasn't involved when they raised the money, obviously, but I can sidestep that one. Fortunately, I do think that in retrospect that's clear, but looking forward, people see the growth potential of an amazing new technology, and they make investments. And by the way, at the time that those companies raised money, there were lots of other startups raising money, and it was the time of the internet boom, and the animal spirits were raging. And so looking back, the underwriting not as solid, but at the time there was just a massive growth push, and the expectation that the world was changing, and as a result, these investments, which were more speculative and they were higher rated, higher interest rate bonds, were gonna pay off. So they represented a good risk reward proposition. But yeah, obviously the projected outcome was was far from the real outcome.
Okay, quickly, what was your, I guess, not number one takeaway, but biggest takeaways from London? I know we alluded to it before. What, I guess, prompted that decision, and then what was that experience like?
Oh yeah, we moved to London because after the global financial crisis here, we thought there was a huge restructuring wave in the U.S., and we thought that Europe was going to follow. In fact, shortly after I arrived there was a lot of fear that the euro would collapse, and countries would go back to their individual currencies, and there could be a lot of knock-on effects to the common market. And I guess, unfortunately, as a restructuring professional, but fortunately as a citizen, that didn't happen. But there's still like a decent amount of restructurings over that time in Europe. But what we were looking to do was just to beef up our bench. We had sent one person over before me, then I went, and somebody else came afterward, just to add more heft to the European bench. And it wound up being a fantastic experience. I think it made me a much better banker and professional. I think I talked before about the importance of listening. What I found in Europe, unlike here, was that it was a much more relationship-based market, and also understanding what people mean rather than what they say is really critical. So what I found in Europe was most business meetings happened in English because that's the common language. But when somebody from Italy says something in English, and somebody from France says something in English, and somebody from the UK says something in English, and somebody from U.S. says something in English, they could all be saying something similar, but they could all be meaning something very different.
Right.
Or alternatively, they could all be saying something very different and meaning something very similar. So I think I think Europe taught me the importance of really paying attention to what people wanted, even when it wasn't necessarily clear from what they were saying. In the U.S., I think our culture, people tend to be very direct. In Europe, much less so, especially in certain countries. And so, I think it made me a much better banker because deals there have had a lot more complexity. In the U.S., the deals that have been involved in generally follow. You think about what the right economic solution is, and the deal generally follows. In Europe, because of relationships and different cultural sensitivities, I found that didn't always happen, and so that was a great learning experience there. Just dealing with clients from different backgrounds and investors from different backgrounds was hugely important. In many ways, even though it's roughly much more diverse than here, and even in London, people in London came from all over in a way that you just didn't see as much here.
Did you pick up soccer or driving on the left side of the road? Either one of those?
I did pick up driving.
Let's hope.
Soccer a little bit. Driving actually wasn't. It was easy.
It's not as hard as people make it seem.
Yeah, exactly. No, not at all. So when we got to London, we bought a car 3 weeks after we got there, and so the first weekend I had to. My son was I think 4 at the time. I took him to a birthday party, and I remember parking and then pulling out of a spot, and I didn't judge the left side of the car all that well because I wasn't used to that, and I took out the side of somebody's car, and I left a note, put it under the wiper, and said, "I'm sorry. Here's my number. Call me." The guy never called me. And I felt terribly for that. But after that one incident, nothing.
Wow.
Nothing, fortunately.
And soccer?
Soccer picked up a little bit. Actually, when I was there, the NFL had just started to ramp up the London series. So we had season tickets to Wembley Stadium, and I think when I was there, the football games also went to the Lord's cricket ground as well. So we did that, and then we had done some work with the FA, which governs English football. So they had us to a few England games at Wembley Stadium, which was great.
Wow, that's awesome. I don't know what's more impressive, the taking your whole family to London thing, or your son getting invited to a birthday party 4 weeks into his tenure in London.
At 4 years old, they're not so picky with their friends.
Making friends right away. That's amazing.
Well, we were. That's the thing. When we lived in London, there was a great expat community, and as I mentioned, we had made some really good friends who are still really close friends to this day. A number of Americans who because when you're over there, you become each other's family. And then also people from all around the world, Japan, people who just happen to be in London. And again, you're all there. You don't have families, so people warm up really quickly.
It's amazing,
and it's great. I mean, there was one time our kids were. I remember our kids were playing, and one of our kids got hurt, and I was at work, and my wife called me, and I had to go take him to the emergency room, and my wife came and. She called a friend who was having people over for dinner. The friend dropped everything. Her husband hosted the dinner party, and she came over to stay with her other son. So it's a very, very, very good supportive expat community.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
So about 2 years ago, you decided to make the move to Delos Capital, where you're now working. So tell us what went behind that decision and what kind of work you're doing for them now.
Yeah. I guess so. First of all, every banker, I thought I could be a good investor, and wanted the opportunity to do that, which is seriously part of it. But first of all, I'd been a professional for a long time and wanted the opportunity to build a business. And at Delos, I'd have the opportunity to do that, really to help lead and grow a business, hire people, determine the direction of the firm, and take it forward. The other thing that I really wanted to do was, I found that so at Lazard we had a great business, but effectively the way it worked, it would be we'd be hired on a deal, we'd do the deal, complete the deal, make good friends, get paid a lot of money, and then move on to the next deal. And what I wanted to do was to basically, first of all, like stay involved in the companies we had worked with, because when you take a company through the crucible of a restructuring and then it turns around, it's very gratifying. We would typically, sometimes we'd come back, we'd do follow-on deals for them, but we'd work really closely with companies, and then we'd kind of have lunch with them when they were in New York,
Right, no longer
a couple of times a year or
relationship.
whatever, but no longer be, day to day with them. So what we do, for many of our deals is a significant portion of our fee for advising a company is in the company's securities. So, we stay involved, we get to, see company turn around, and ultimately we think that it could be a lot more profitable because the money that effectively comes in when a company completes a restructuring or a complicated transaction usually has very attractive terms to it. So by participating in that, we think it aligns us a lot better with our clients, allows us to stay involved with a company after we close the deal, and ultimately is more profitable.
So you guys,
and by the way, sometimes we'll also invest into it, in addition to getting paid a portion of our fee in paper and deal paper, we'll also write a check to invest in a deal.
so you guys aren't a traditional private equity firm.
We have a private equity business, which is a kind of classic private equity business, and then we have an advisory business, and then we merge the two by offering the ability to advise and invest in the same deal.
Oh, that is interesting. And so you work primarily with both, or do you primarily do the advisory?
No, I work across both. That's one of the reasons I went to do it.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so that's super interesting. And when you're looking at that, a lot of the time you don't have necessarily the expertise in those certain fields, right? Because a lot of these are specific companies that people have been working in their entire lives in those industries. So how do you go about it to really learn about those specific companies with beyond the finances?
Yeah, so great question. So first of all, like over my career, one of the nice things about being involved in capital solutions and restructuring deals is you see many different industries over that time, because industries go through cycles, and when they have problems, you kind of like learn about those industries. So I've had I'd say like a minor in many different kind of a major in balance sheets and a minor in many different industries along the way.
Right.
So not every industry, but many, if not most. So kind of can get a feel reasonably quickly for different companies and their industries and how they make money, what the upside is, what the risks are, and evaluate that. But in addition to that, in virtually every deal we're investing in, we will work alongside an operating partner who has that experience that you're talking about, who has years or decades of experience with different companies, and will typically join the board alongside us, and is basically incentivized to be 100% aligned with us, so that we make good investment calls and on going in, good investment calls coming out, and we give the company good guidance all the way through. And when we do invest in companies, we like to partner with management teams rather than tell management teams what to do. So we like to. One thing, I think I've alluded to this, but we really try to invest in people. I found that you'd almost rather have a great team and an okay business plan than an outstanding business plan and an okay team. I find that if you have the right people, they will find a way to be successful. If you don't have the right people, it's really challenging to be successful, even if you're in the right place at the right time. So we spend a lot of time making sure we're investing with the right people and giving them rope and providing, strategic guidance along the way. But we like to partner and support management teams, almost like I was saying about like what Barry and Terry did for me. We like to do the same thing, so that they can feel empowered to go and be their best, most successful.
What are those characteristics within those management teams that you're looking for? How do you say this is a good management team that's going to bring success?
I think that, but then I think the intangible qualities are what's most important. How the team gets along with one another, how how they treat one another, how they treat us. Are they defensive? Do they acknowledge? When we talk about things, do they acknowledge mistakes that they've made and how they've solved them, or do they just talk about how great things are? Or do they stop and give other people credit? Do they let it's just the CEO talking, or does he or she allow the other members of the team to talk and contribute? Do they, when you ask a question, do they think about things, or do they just kind of jump right in and answer right away? Do they listen as well as talk? And from that, I think you can get a good sense about whether people are going to be good partners. I think I talked earlier about kind of like aligning with companies, but we put a huge emphasis on partnership and wanting to work with good people on more than like if we work on one deal and then we move on to something else, like that's fine. But what we really try to do at Delos is to do deals with, find good people that we like to work with, and do multiple deals with them.
Wow, it's amazing. What has been that experience like, also building a business aside for being a professional, and maybe some takeaways or shocking insights that you've had so far?
It's been fun and hard at the same time. I've really enjoyed. I've really enjoyed it overall. There are days where you kind of want to rack your head and you're like, oh man, somebody else used to do this. I didn't have to worry about it. I could just do my day job. Right. But overall, it's been very rewarding because you're doing it for yourself and your team and your partners, and been very rewarding. So what I like, I guess what I like about it is you're really responsible for the outcome here. It's not like you're making the strategic calls. You're making the calls on whom to hire, whom not to hire. You're making the calls on what opportunities to pursue or not to pursue. And so it's very empowering. It's also very humbling because you definitely don't get everything right. And you need to be, flexible and move on. I've also found, frankly, being in that seat it's different in the sense that have a lot of people reaching out, asking you for things all the time, and you want to be helpful and supportive of people when they call, because that's your I guess by nature that's what I want to do. But it's taught me how to say no better, and also how to say no more quickly. The one thing you don't want to do, so learning how to come to a quick no often is the second best answer for somebody, after a yes.
Yeah. And outside of kind of the business impact that you've been able to make, what kind of impact do you want to leave in terms of just on a personal level, in terms of your values, in terms of giving back?
Well, I think one thing is definitely like education and like training. Like it's important. I've had really good relationships, kind of both up and down over my career. I talked about some of the people who are older than me, who have helped me, who I feel very indebted to, and I've also been very fortunate to have a number of people who are younger than I am, who I've worked with over the years and helped to mentor, and we still remain very close. One of them works with me now. And hopefully over time more will. So I think that's kind of like a direct impact. I think the other impact is helping other people when they're in need. I spend a fair amount of time when I'm not doing business, helping with different charitable causes and helping individuals, either like say people in college who are looking for internships, or people who may have hit a bump in the road with either advice or support to get out of it. So I guess that's the number one impact is helping people and being a good friend and supporter.
Yeah, it's amazing.
We like to ask all our guests this question at the end of the podcast. Sort of, what's one skill, experience, or story that's taught you that's specific to the banking industry? I guess now we could say private equity industry, that you think applies to all other industries and that will lead to successful professionals representing Judaism across every industry?
It's a great question. I'd say the ability to bounce back. So, as a banker, for example, you go out and look to get hired on deals, and sometimes you may have the best ideas, and you may know the people well, and you may have a great team, and you don't win that deal for whatever reason. Somebody else is owed a favor, or they think you have a conflict, which isn't a conflict, or your fee's too high, or somebody doesn't like you for some reason, or whatever reason. And so the ability to recognize that, okay, it's a marathon and not a sprint, and to kind of step back and look at the bigger picture and recognize that everything's going to be okay, I find a really important lesson. Probably one that I didn't learn early enough, because everybody, a lot of the people I know fortunately have been very fortunate, have been very successful, and so you hit a rut in the road, and you just have to keep on going and fighting through it. So I think that is important. I think you asked about Judaism, and I think having faith is important. That things will, today didn't turn out okay, but next week will be fine. Or I can't tell you how many times, and again, I think this is something that you kind of see getting older and maturing. Like, you look at one thing, and that one thing hasn't turned out great, but everything else is okay. And I think a lot of times people focus on the cloud and what's causing the cloud, and that can distract you from the rest of the sunny day. And so a lot of times it's making sure you appreciate the cloud and what caused that cloud and how you can fix it, but also focus on the opportunities and how you can make the most of them. Because if you spend too much time on problems, you often will ignore opportunities. And having that balance and perspective, I think, is really important to being successful.
Yeah, that's great. And the great Yoni Goodman, who came on this podcast, told us his favorite quote is, "Everyone wants to see the cake, but no one wants to see the dirty dishes in the sink." Right? So everyone has a story where they're bouncing back from something and they're overcoming some sort of obstacle.
Yeah, no. One of my favorite quotes is, I think it's a Winston Churchill quote that success is going from failure to failure without losing enthusiasm. And
that's great. I love that.
That's amazing.
It's really important, I think, to keep that in perspective. I think being a parent also taught me that as well. You gotta step up there for your kids, and also facing defeat from time to time, I think, helps you be a better person, helps you grow. There's also, Ray Dalio also talks about this in his interviews a lot of times, about the cycle of going from pain to success, and back to pain and success, and that yielding growth over time. So that's kind of learned that, saw that at Lazard, see that now at Delos, see that in other aspects of life, and I think internalizing that and recognize that kind of nothing's ever as good or as bad as it seems, but you just got to keep on showing up is really, really important.
It's amazing.
Yeah. Do you have any final takeaways, Ari, that you want to leave the audience with?
Well, just a lot of gratitude for having me today. I'm very, I would say I'm very grateful for the many blessings I've had in life, not just professionally. Personally, I have two amazing kids, and most of all, an amazing wife who pushes me every day, and kind of keeps me honest, which I really value, and we have a very close relationship. So that is probably the greatest blessing I have.
That's amazing.
It's amazing. Thank you so much, Ari, for coming on. Thank you to all our listeners. Thank you to Charles, our producer. Thank you, Hila, my partner. Thank you to Ashley on the social media side. And thank you most of all to our listeners. You guys are the ones that drive this podcast. Thanks again so much, Ari, for coming on, and we will catch you on the next one.
And shout out JB.
Shout out JB. Thank you. Catch you on the next one.
Thank you.